Hey out there, rock and rollers. Welcome to the 109th episode of the Ugly American Werewolf in London Rock podcast, brought to you by me, your host, Mac B, the Wolf, and I will be joined, as always, by my partner in crime, Gary Action Jackson, on the East Coast of America. And I hope everybody had a wonderful Hanukkah and Christmas. It was pretty chill around here. It actually didn't go anywhere or do much of anything. And gosh, what a blessing that is. After a crazy year of moving a few times and trying to assimilate to Amsterdam, a new language, a new culture, it was good to be able to just chill out a little bit and reflect and relax a little bit. And I hope that you were able to do some of the same out there. I also hope that you tuned in to episode number 108, featuring our interview with Jim Cregan, who is a longtime collaborator with Rod Stewart. And of course, he has a new Christmas single, When a Child is Born, that benefits Angel Force USA to help veterans who are struggling with their mental health. And I hope you gave a listen to that and maybe checked out Angel Force USA to see the good work that they're doing there. But to wrap up the year here, last year, we kind of did a year in review, the rock records and people who'd passed away and things like that. But I thought this year, because so many changes happened for Ugly American Werewolf, I mean, we had a lot of milestones this year, right? Hit our 100th episode. We moved to Pantheon Podcasts, which is a brilliant group of podcasters from really around the world, but certainly concentrated in the USA and mostly focused on music. There's really something in there for everybody. And we're just really proud to be part of that fraternity, and proud of the folks who we had on our show or who we've been on their show, like the founder of Pantheon Podcasts, Christian Swain, who's got a great show called Rock and Roll Archeology, like Tom and Zeus, the Kiss Kings themselves of Shout It Out Loudcast, like Paul Stevenson of This Day Rocks and Vintage Rock Pod, like Jay at The Hook Rocks, like Christy at Rock Is Lit. Great shows and great folks. And we're going to talk a little bit about them on this show here today, because we're going to walk through all the highlights of everyone we spoke to this year, the albums, the concerts, the podcasters, the artists. And so it's not super long. We actually broke it down into two shows. So this is the first show we're going to talk about all our guests who are podcasters or journalists who've been on the show, to talk about maybe something that they were selling, or to talk about a band or an album that we really wanted to review. And then we're going to talk about all the concerts that we finally got to go to. Because, after 2 years of sitting inside from COVID and waiting for certain tours to happen, finally we got to get out and do that. And we're not just talking about one or two shows. Jackson and I went to almost a dozen shows between the two of us. We made episodes about those shows, and some of them were so much fun, and we just kind of wanted to review all that here with you and give you a chance to maybe go back and listen to some of those in case you missed them earlier this year. And then for next week's show, which will become show number 110, we're going to talk about all the artists that we had on this year, which is a real thrill for us. Look, we love rock music. Other than our families, it's the one thing we love more than anyone or anything. And that's kind of why we started this podcast, was so that we can talk to each other about the music that we love, about albums we like or have discovered or have had shoved down our throats. We're like, okay, maybe we need to check these out. We just talk about rock and roll between the two of us on a weekly basis. And then we were hoping, well, maybe one day we'll get to talk to some people who we love, some of the artists that have made this amazing music, and ask them some questions, maybe some questions we've always wanted to ask them. So when you start a podcast, you start to put a list together of some of the people who you'd like to talk to. And there's some that might be a stretch, and there's some that you're never going to get on the show, but there's somebody thinking, hey, it'd be great if we can get her on. It'd be wonderful if we get him onto the show. And so some of that came to fruition in 2022, and we definitely want to share that with you. But so we don't have a 2.5-hour program for you. We're going to break that up a little bit. And this week we're going to focus on all of our podcast guests and all the concerts that we got to review. And another amazing thing that happened to us in 2022 is we became sponsored. We found an incredible sponsor in the UK, rarevinyl.com, who have been procuring and shipping records all over the world for nearly 40 years here. I've been to their warehouse. I've been to their offices. They have an amazing team down there taking great care to find all these old records or programs or singles or CDs or DVDs or whatever it is you're looking for, posters, taking care of them and then shipping them all over the world. They've got a 5-star rating from Trustpilot. They've got 250,000 items in stock. And if you use the code PODCAST, PODCAST, you can get 10% off not only that first order, but all your orders going forward. So if you're a record collector in the UK, in Europe, in the US, in Japan, wherever you might be, Australia, go to rarevinyl.com or EIL.com. Use the code PODCAST, save 10% off all your orders. And we had a great year with Rare Vinyl, so proud that they sponsored us. Okay, like I said, we would have to do 2.5 hours to get through everything on the year in review here. But on this first one, we want to focus on the guests we've had, the fellow podcasters, some journalists, writers, people like that on. And then we're going to talk about the concerts that turned us on that we finally got to go see, including some bands that I never thought I'd see again, like the Rolling Stones, some bands that I'm seeing for the first time, like Duran Duran, my first trip to Royal Albert Hall, a lot of fun stuff to talk about. Jackson's first trip to see the Cult in years. We're really happy that live music is back, and we're really happy we were able to talk about it on the show here. So settle in. This is me and Jackson on the 2022 year in review of the Ugly American Werewolf in London, right here on The Wolf.
So, last year, at the end of the year, we did kind of a year review to kind of talk about albums we liked, stuff that happened, in the world of rock and roll and stuff like that. But I thought this year it would be good to kind of reflect on the year of the Ugly American Werewolf in London. Like the shows we've done, the guests that we've had, because 2022 was a real pivotal year for us, if you think about it, buddy. I mean, most of the first year was us trying to figure out, what are we doing? How do we do this? How do we get a guest on? All that kind of stuff. But this year, we did a lot of stuff, a lot of cool stuff between the topics you and I chose, between the fact that we got to see each other on both continents, this year. We became a part of Pantheon Podcasts, which was huge for us. We got a killer sponsor, and I want to talk about them a little bit. But then we had a lot of great guests, both podcaster and I guess you'd call journalist writer types. And then also, musicians, people who we really admire and have loved over the years, and some we've just kind of gotten to know more recently. But it was really kind of us taking the next step, really pushing forward and pushing the boundaries of what we want to do with our little show here.
Yeah, I think you're right. This was the year we kind of really stepped out into our own, figured out how to do the audio a little better. And my memory is just Swiss cheese, because I was looking back through the episodes. I'm like, wow, we did a lot of stuff this year. Like, it starts to get mashed up between 2021 and 2022. And some stuff that I thought we had done a couple of weeks ago was really back. Like, we talked to Sonny back in like August.
I know.
Wasn't that like 2 weeks ago? No. So it's fun to go back and reflect. And yeah, to think about the number of guests that we had this year versus last year, it's insane, the people that we got to talk to.
It's crazy, and it's so much fun, and we didn't miss a week, man. We did not miss a show this week.
Correct.
This year, which I'm pretty proud of. It's not like we didn't have obstacles or things that would have prevented us from doing it, or putting one out there, But I mean, to give you some numbers, just because I like stats, we did do 52. This will be our 52nd show of the year. So 1 week, proud of that. We started the year with Van Halen, the first album. And interestingly enough, about almost a year later, about 50 weeks later, we did Diver Down. And then the last interview we did on show 108 is Jim Cregan, who was on last week, amazing guitar player and songwriter who played with Rod Stewart many, many years, has that great Christmas single, When a Child is Born. But we did 29 album reviews, 29 different albums that we reviewed this year. And sometimes we would do two at once, or sometimes we would do an album in addition to an interview, like we did with Jeff Downs and Close to the Edge. Sometimes we would review an album with a guest, like we did with On and Off Percival, Gentle Giant, or we did with Amanda Lehman. We basically walked track by track through her own album, Innocence and Illusion. So we reviewed 29 different records. We did we had 11 different podcasts, and we'll call them journalist types on the show to do album reviews with us or to talk about different things. And we'll get into some of those here. We did 10 shows on live concerts. And technically we did 12 different concerts because sometimes we would double up because I'd seen a show and you'd seen a show that week. And so we kind of did them together. Mm-hmm. And we'll kind of go through the list of those. But we had 9 shows where we interviewed artists. And of course, the first one was Amanda Lehman back in January. And of course, Amanda is a very talented singer, songwriter, guitar player in her own right. Came to know her through her work with Steve Hackett. But she had her own album, Innocence Illusion, which made my top 5 list of 2021. And I invited her to come on the show. She was happy to do it. And she actually came back again to promote a single that she did, One Last Spin. But when we first started a little more than 2 years ago, we did dream about getting some of these folks on. Mm-hmm. I don't know how I wouldn't say how serious we were, but it's more like how much we really thought it would happen.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. It's 2 different things. We were dead serious. I just didn't know if we could actually make it happen.
Exactly. Yeah. It's absolutely what we wanted. And we believe we would do a good job if we got them on.
Well, that's why, like, when you said that Amanda was going to come on, I'm like, really? Okay. Well, I didn't think this was ever going to happen. But yeah, let's put together some questions because we have to sound semi-intelligent here when we talk to her.
And you talk about sound quality. Obviously, I was living in London at the time. And, I live in a very nice block, but it's a block that's, hundreds of years old. So there's constantly construction going on, whether it's someone renovating a house or, we had a bad flood in the summer of 2021, and some people were still rebuilding after that. Or maybe they're just ripping up the street and putting in, cable wire and then, putting it back together, So that day, I went to the front of the house where I usually recorded, and they were jackhammering, So I'm like, okay, well, I'm not going to do it in the front of the house. So I go to the back of the house. Well, back there, they were, they were grilling and sawing because they were repairing. I was like, oh, this is horrible. So then I go into the bathroom, figure, okay, I can get quieted. But the echo was so horrible. But, we would sound like, complete fools. So I'm like, oh, God, we finally get an artist on, someone I admire, someone I really want to talk to. And we're going to sound like such fools. Basically, we just got lucky that the guys out front were taking a lunch break. And we had a great sound and we had a great time talking to them, man. But those are just some of the ups and downs of it,
Yeah. And she was very gracious for 2 guys who were basically just still learning the ropes. And this being the first, I think she was the first actual interview that we had done with an artist. So, yeah, I was very nervous. I thought it turned out great. And she was just absolutely, to be the first one out of the gate, absolutely delightful to talk to.
Wonderful. And of course, I was certain that I was going to be able to see her with Steve as they toured on Seconds Out and and kind of wrapped up that tour. And then I did see them on Seconds Out, and then they were going to do Foxtrot at 50, which they did. They started this fall. They will continue into next year. I had tickets to see them, but of course we moved to Amsterdam, so I had to give those tickets up, unfortunately. Speaking of tickets I might have to give up. So we moved to Amsterdam, like, great. Amsterdam's a major city. We're going to have some big concerts. I'm going to be here a couple of years. Who's coming? Well, so I load up. I get good seats to see Roger Waters on his farewell tour. Metallica announces the coolest tour I've ever heard in my life. They're doing 2 nights in a city, 2 nights in two shows in 3 nights, 2 completely different set lists. They do not repeat the same song at all on those 2 nights. Yep. The tour goes for 2 years. Amsterdam is the first night. I'm like, this is going to be great. I'm going to see them. We're going to do a show on it. It's going to do great ratings because no one will have seen them live yet. We'll be the first. Well, now you're moving to America. Like, yeah, well, maybe I'll use some frequent flyer miles. Come on back for that weekend because I'm not missing that. Got Peter Gabriel tickets, which is his first tour of Europe in more than a decade. And I was going to take my daughter. Yeah. But like, this will complete Genesis for me, right? Because I saw Phil and Tony and Mike at the O2 this year, for their second to last ever show. I've seen Steve Hackett a couple times. This completes Genesis. Well, maybe not. I don't know if I'm going to fly all the way back. for that. Obviously you and I are going to see Iron Maiden both in Amsterdam and Brussels, and we're keeping that.
Can't wait for that. That is going to be fantastic.
That's going to be awesome. But now I need to book some more hotel rooms and book my own flight and all that kind of stuff. And I'll tell you the thing that really kind of pissed me off.
Oh boy. Yeah.
That morning, the morning I found out we're probably going to move back to, it was like the night that I found out we're probably moving back to America. That morning, I bought tickets to see Kiss in Amsterdam for my daughter for Christmas. And it's a week after her birthday. And this was going to be her big Christmas present. Like, I told you it probably wasn't going to happen again, but one more time we need to see Kiss. Because the first time I took her, she loved it, but she was 4. And she couldn't get through the whole show. The second time she was 5. It was really only about 6 months or 4 months later. And she was overly tired and she just couldn't take it. I'm like, you know what? We're in London. I'm just going to take her home. And if they come back around, I'll take her when she's older. Well, now she's older. She can do it. And the day that I got him, I said, okay, Andrew, you're not going to live here now. I'm like, what the fuck, man? What a bunch of bullshit. But I might fly her back for it. I don't know. I've accumulated a lot of miles. I ran up some points on my American Express, so I might consider it.
Yeah.
Hi, this is Steve Hackett, and you're listening to The Ugly American Werewolf in London.
So what would you like to talk about first? You want to talk about shows? You want to talk about, I was thinking we do guests, shows, and then artists.
Yeah, sounds good.
Is that all good?
Yeah.
Because I think I asked you to do like your top 10 shows, but then I tried to do that. I'm like, this is fucking awesome. I can't, I can't separate this. And how can I say that I was, happier to talk to Guy Pratt and Gary Kemp than I was to talk to Jeff Downs? Like that doesn't, how can I say that?
Yeah, it really is like asking you, which one is your favorite kid? They were all, I don't think we had a bad interview.
Exactly.
And it was great to talk to every single one of them.
Absolutely. And I won't go through every single show and every single album that we reviewed, but I do want to talk about all of our guests, the shows that we were able to see and review, and absolutely, every artist that we had on there. And we can talk about maybe a couple of special moments, but let's start to walk through it. I'm going to kind of do these in order just because that's how I wrote them down. But starting at the beginning of the year, we had on, I believe, Neil from Def Leppard Pod was our first repeat guest, right? We had him on in 2021 to talk Hysteria with us. And then on episode 60, we talked about the Beatles' Get Back, because the documentary had come out at the end of the year, and he's a Liverpudlian who, had the Beatles shoved down his throat his life. And, but it was such an amazing documentary. I wanted to not only talk about it with you, but to get an English person's perspective. And someone who grew up in Liverpool, I thought would be a good idea. And it was a great show. It was a fun talk.
Yeah, it was interesting to hear his point of view from somebody who, like you said, he grew up around the Beatles, but admittedly, he was never a big Beatles fan.
Right.
Only because, I don't think he really ever gave them a chance, because everybody was like, oh, well, they're the best band in the world. They're the greatest thing that's ever happened. No one will ever top that. And if it's not from your generation, you're always going to say, well, you don't know anything. But to hear him to say that he went through the documentary and just got a better feel for them. And maybe he didn't become a super huge fan, but definitely got more of a reverence and enjoyed watching it. It was pretty cool to get his perspective.
Absolutely. And it was an amazing cultural touchstone, I think, for so many people of so many different ages, right? This Beatles documentary to kind of show them, in their element there. And it's like George was like 25 or 26 maybe at the time. And you think, oh, well, they're so old and mature. They've done all these things and made all this money. They were still kids,
Yeah. Yeah.
Crazy.
And to watch them go through the creative process was pretty excellent too. I mean, now it's been, years and years and years, and you've heard the records a million times, but this was them actually thinking of the music and putting it together. It was a great kind of a window into how that worked. And the fact that they cut down, I don't know, what was it, like 100 and something hours to do that. That was a massive feat also. So kudos to Peter Jackson for making something that, even though it was like 10 hours long altogether, very watchable. Yeah, and interesting from start to finish.
Absolutely. Fantastic. And it wasn't the only movie that we reviewed. We did review the Ronnie James Dio, documentary later in the year. So I think that might be something we do more of next year.
Okay, yeah,
because we did Rush their concert movie or whatever. We done that in 2021, but hopefully there'll be more opportunities to do some of those things. And obviously, review records. We could review movies, especially if we have a good, maybe it's a documentary or they have a good music tie. Now, Neil is a huge Def Leppard fan, obviously. And our guest on show number 63, Chris from My Rock and Roll Heaven, he may be the biggest Def Leppard fan in all of Canada. And he's a great guest. That he loves music from that kind of late 80s hard rock, hair metal, or, time period, and he's a real expert on it, and he used to have a great show in his own right. I think he's working on something new, but this is the first time we actually got him on twice. So show 63 was us talking about Guns N' Roses' Appetite for Destruction on its 35th anniversary or thereabouts, but we got him back later in the year on episode 91 because he, like you, went to the stadium tour and got to see Def Leppard with Motley Crue, with Poison, with Joan Jett. And although we had already heard your review of the stadium tour, I thought it was cool to get his perspective, not only because he's such a huge fan and he's seen them so many times, but also because he did see them indoors, because the Toronto, whatever they call that, the Rogers Center, whatever it's called.
The old Sky Dome.
Yeah, that's right. It has the retractable roof, which they put up. So that kind of changes the element.
Yeah, and it was interesting too because we're kind of on the same page with a lot of stuff. We're also not. I mean, he is a big Poison fan and was excited to see them, whereas I went and saw it and said, well, if they're there, I'll watch them. But if they weren't there, that wouldn't hurt my feelings either.
Exactly.
So somebody who was actually excited to see them perform, and just to get another take on it, where it's. There's a lot of stuff that's similar, but there's also a lot of stuff that's different. Like you said, he's a lot into the hair metal of the late '80s, early '90s, and I know he loves to collect cassette tapes. So relive those glory days of the Alpine and the '82 Honda or wherever you were driving around at that time.
Well, I think he'll collect anything with Def Leppard on it. He'll collect a reel-to-reel or an 8-track with Def Leppard on it, but he's a super guy, and as most Canadians are, very nice. And he's very knowledgeable about all that kind of stuff, has great facts. And, check out Rock These Tweets, at Rock These Tweets. He's got a lot of, on this day kind of stuff. And some of it's a little, weighted toward Canada or Canadian type artists, but that's okay. It's a great way to learn about bands that we might not know.
Yeah. The other thing that he does a lot that I like is he posts the charts. On this day in, 1993 or whatever. Oh, yeah, I remember that song. And I can't believe that didn't chart higher, or it was higher than I thought it was. It's just interesting to go into the time machine. And there's stuff that you definitely remember, but there's also stuff that you've forgotten. And it's a good way to kind of refresh your memory and maybe listen to some stuff that you've forgotten about.
Well, what's amazing to me is they'll show a chart from like 1983. And like, oh, my God, I remember all these albums. I remember all these songs. Show me a chart from 2003. I'm like, what the fuck is this shit? I don't remember any of this. None of this stuff is timeless. And I'm like, okay, boomer, yeah, you're old. But it makes me wonder because we bought those albums and then we would listen to the heck out of them. And we'd go to our friend's house and they would have the albums we didn't have. But kids today who don't own it and maybe they download it and stream it, does it resonate with them? Are they going to look back when they're in their 40s? To stuff when they were 10 years old, whenever they were getting into music, and say, oh, yeah, I remember all this stuff. And they'd be like, none of this looks familiar.
I can't imagine because it's so disposable now. You don't really get that kind of relationship. It's whatever's hot, and then the next thing comes along, and you forget about thing one because you're on to the next thing. Whereas, like you said, if you bought it, oh, no, I'm holding on to that with both hands, and I'm going to listen to it till it falls apart.
Yeah, even if you don't like it. You're going to listen to it over and over again because you spent your whole month's allowance on the damn tape, So, yeah, absolutely. But he did a great job running it through Appetite for Destruction. I was saying, you and I had a little bit of a disagreement on, what was your favorite song and what was my least favorite song.
Which actually it's good because you don't want, hey, I think that's great. Hey, I think that's great too. That's my favorite. It's my favorite too. If you get a little bit of not disagreement, but different points of view, I think it makes it a little more interesting.
Yeah, and that's why I like to have guests on too, because you and I are fairly aligned. It's not like we both love the same stuff and we always agree. But the reason we talk about a record is because we both like it a lot. Right. Yeah. Yeah. All right. So that was show 63 with Chris. And then again, show 91 when we did the stadium tour with him. Show 67 was someone who reached out to us, who we did not know, who has since become a dear friend. And that's Christy Alexander Halberg.
Ah, yes.
Author of Searching for Jimmy Page, now host of Pantheon Podcast, Rock is Lit, which talks to authors who have written books about rock music. And she was good enough to have us on her show to talk about Dazed and Confused, the Richard Linklater classic, with maybe one of the best soundtracks, technically two soundtracks ever. But having Christy on to talk about her book and to talk a little bit about Jimmy Page's Outrider album, because that's kind of at the time it was set and it was something that was influential to her. Well, it's just cool to find a kindred spirit, someone with a lot of energy, a lot of passion about Zeppelin and rock music.
Yeah. And that is probably my most favorite thing about doing this podcast is meeting people like that. Somebody you would never talk to. I mean, she doesn't live anywhere near us. She's a writer and we are not big readers, but to meet somebody like that, putting it mildly, to meet somebody like that and to just have that instant like friendship and kinship. And it was great to talk to her, get her perspective on, Jimmy Page, who was huge for the two of us. And it's interesting because when you think of Led Zeppelin, you don't think of women a lot. You think of like, it's for guys and,
hard rock, testosterone.
Exactly. Correct. And to hear her say how much she loved, to listen to the records and what a big part of her life, it was great to get that perspective and then get to kind of go forward with that, go on her podcast and talk about another thing that we really loved, which was Dazed and Confused.
That's right. And we'll definitely be having her back in 2023, at least once, and we would gladly do her show anytime she asks. And I'm kind of hopeful that maybe one day we can all meet up, especially if I'm coming back home.
Right.
I don't know when that opportunity might present itself, but we'll see. We'll see. But, wonderful person and a fun show. Check out Rocky's Lit. Now, not too long after that, show number 70, we kind of did a double header. One, we had Amanda Lehman back to talk about her charity single, One Last Spin, which is talking about gambling awareness, which I think is a good cause. But we also had rock journalist and Estella on, talking about the difficulties of being, a woman in this industry, but also kind of learning and teaching us about some of the festivals she goes to, because everybody knows Glastonbury and everybody knows Download, but she's talking about smaller festivals to try to get to more unknown bands, to try to lift them up. And I thought that was a cool show to be able to do. Two women in rock. Yeah,
definitely. It was great to talk to Amanda again. That was the day that went down. I was in London. We had spent the day together, I think the previous day. And he said, well, we'll meet up again. And so I was doing the math in my head and I'm on the tube thinking, I don't think I have enough time. I think I'm going to be late to this because you got to do the transfer. Then I get to the station and I'm booking it down Abbey Road to try and get to your place and show up like 5 minutes before she's supposed to be on there. But that worked out well. It was great to talk to Amanda again. And it was great to talk to Anna about, her experiences going through that. You'd think that journalists are, welcomed into these things, but sometimes not. Sometimes it's rough, and sometimes the festivals they're not super greatly organized or put together. And she has a passion, and if she's going to get it done, she's going to get in there. She's going to get the interviews. She's going to tough it out. And it's great to hear somebody talk about having a profession that's also their passion.
Well, and that's what I really like too, because she wasn't always a rock journalist. She had done other things and worked in another industry, like I have. And then, you kind of say, well, I'd really rather be talking about rock music with my buddy Garrett. Can we shift gears? Can we make this happen somehow? It gave me hope that you can still You don't have to be sucked into that corporate vortex of soulless, slavery. You can actually do something you love. And so she's an inspiration to a lot of people. And she's got killer hair.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's pink, sometimes it's purple, but it's always amazing.
Definitely looks the part. She's gone all in with the rock and roll lifestyle.
Yeah, she's awesome. And she's written in lots of different publications, working on a lot of cool stuff for 2023. But now skipping forward to episode 76, this is one that we really had been hoping for a long time. And that's having the Kiss Kings, the number one Kiss podcast on the planet, Tom and Zeus from Shout It Out Loudcast. Look, you and I both didn't listen to many podcasts before we decided to do a podcast. But then once I got into doing a podcast, I'm like, all right, well, I got to listen to some good ones, right? And one that I liked was the Rock on Tours with Guy Pratt and Gary Kemp, very big in England. We'll come back to that. But one that I found that I absolutely loved was the Shout It Out Loudcast, because these guys seem to be about our age, and it turns out they are. We're in the exact same grade.
Yeah.
And so they grew up the same time. They all the same cultural references, same movies, same music, all that kind of stuff. And then, yes, they're in depth on Kiss. They love the same faults and silly stuff about Kiss that we love. But mostly, I got to tell you, I love these guys because they make me laugh.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. It's a great show. It's not, I mean, it is Kiss centric.
Sure.
But basically, it doesn't matter what the subject matter of the week is. You just want to hear what they have to say in general, because they wrap up the week. They read tweets and Facebook and email stuff that comes into them. They've really created a little universe for themselves with the Kiss fans. And yeah, it's great because they are giant Kiss fans, but they are not, the blind, whatever they do is great.
Kiss
correct.
Fans,
correct. Yeah. They will call them out on stuff that they don't like, stuff that they think is crap. So yeah, it's great. And, honestly, like you said, they're the same age. We could have easily, had we gone to college with them, we could have easily been friends with them just as easily as anybody else that we were friends with where we went.
And they're prolific, man. I mean, now look, Tom suffered a horrible tragedy this year. And obviously our thoughts and prayers went out to him, and trying to support him as best we could. And during the holidays, I just wish him and his family all the best. But other than that, they never miss a week, and they also do album review crew with Sonny Pooni once a month. They also do the Zeppelin Chronicles with Jay from the Hook Rocks, our other Pantheon podcast buddy. They've also started a Dorn Damage show, which they're essentially doing once a week now. I know they don't have to do it once a week. It's kind of one of those things they can do it whenever they want, and maybe it's 20 minutes or maybe it's an hour and a half, whatever. But they're not missing that much. So the guys are prolific and they're funny. And I got to tell you, including our show, it's the only show I don't miss. It's the only show I make sure I hear every single week. And that's not because I'm dying to know their opinion of the Creatures of the Night box set. It's because they make me laugh. They're funny guys, and
yeah.
In a world where we live through COVID and floods and living in 5 different places in the course of a year, those guys make my day.
Yeah, and the fact that, like you were saying, I mean, the amount of output that they have is insane, because I think they both have full-time jobs.
Oh yeah,
and there was one, via families and everything. And when they were talking about being on the Kiss cruise, and then they interviewed like every band that they liked on one show, and then they're talking about doing these 3 other shows and being up at 4 a.m. and editing. I'm like, oh my goodness! I mean, kudos to them. They are very passionate about what they do, and that 2 great guys who, again, I mean, we had never met them before. We had them on the show, and it was like we'd known them for years.
Well, of course, that show. I had the Wolf Cub, my daughter Ruby, made her podcast debut, and she comes on, do you like Kiss? I think Destroy is a good album. What's your favorite song off Left Guts? And it got them laughing, so that warmed my heart. That's for sure.
I have to say that I volunteered for a event for the band for my son's one of the football games, and it was just running food out, at the concession stand.
Okay.
And in the cooler, they had ice cold mellow yellow.
Oh my
And
God.
every time I went in there, that's all I could think about was having an ice cold mellow yellow.
That's great. That's
Ay,
great.
Chihuahua. Anyway.
Well, hopefully, those guys are doing great. And hopefully we can have them back on the show here for too long. That'd be a lot of fun. Now, not long after that, on show 78, we connected with someone who's actually become a dear friend of the show. And that's Paul Stevenson of Vintage Rock Pod and This Day Rocks. Paul's kind of up in the north of England, or maybe even the south of Scotland there. He has an amazing radio voice. And he has bona fide rock legends on his show every week. It's something like a third of his guests or something like that are in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, certainly a quarter of them. And the ones who aren't are in bands that or were side people to folks who are in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, So fantastic guy. We were talking about Oasis on that show, like how we're huge, the next Beatles in the UK, and how in America, they're just another band from the Hootie and the Blowfish.
Yeah, great guy to talk to. Ton of knowledge, and like you said, the caliber of guests that he gets is ridiculous. A real humble guy, really nice guy, and I really like. I mean, in addition to the Vintage Rock Pod, I love listening to the This Day in Rock too.
Yeah, This Day Rocks comes out. All right, so Vintage Rock Pod, I think, comes out every Monday, and it has long form interviews with these legends on there. And then Tuesday through Sunday, he has a 4 to 8 minute show, kind of talking about on this day in rock and roll history. And then he'll have a guest talk about something. And you and I have both been on as guests several times, talking about whatever it might be. And I think as this show is released, I think the same day, maybe, we will be on talking about Led Zeppelin 2. And how awesome it is, but how ruined it is by American rock radio. So
it's great to have a little check-in, and there's stuff that I knew, stuff that I didn't know, and just kind of to have that little thing to look forward to every day. It's real easy to listen to, and it's great to be a part of it when he invites us. And
look, he's been huge to our show, not only being a guest or letting us come on his show, but when I have technical difficulties, or I was in Harlem recording and it was hot and the fan went on and it kind of ruined my audio, he cleaned it up for us. I have bad audio.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
He can fix it, whereas I cannot. So he's been a huge resource to us and a good friend of the show. And we thank you for all that you do. Next up, show 88, Sonny Pooni.
Hollywood.
Yeah, Hollywood Pooni from Growin' Up Rock podcast that he does with Stephen Michael, and of course album review crew, Tom and Zeus. What I love about Sonny is he has a great voice.
Yes.
He knows what he likes, even though I disagree with it, a lot of it, but that makes for good back and forth. And he's a little older than we are, so he has some different experiences than we do. But that, the whole, he likes something that we, like I say, hey, you want to talk about Pink Floyd? He's like, oh, Pink Floyd. Yeah, Pink Floyd sucks. I'm like, Pink Floyd sucks. What the hell are you talking about? What's wrong with you? But that's okay. That stirs things up and it gets people talking. So he's got a great thing going on. And he moved to Cincinnati. So I got a feeling that I might just see him at some point in 2023 because we're really not far from each other. Maybe we'll go see a show together.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah, real great guy to talk to. Kind of in that same genre of music, it overlaps a little bit, but yeah, you're right. What he likes, no matter what anybody says, he will die on that hill. He will die on the Richard Marx hill, and he likes them. And honestly, like I love that because if you can defend it, I'll listen to it all day. I'll listen to your opinion all day long. I might not end up liking that artist. But I like the fact that you're passionate about it.
But like he does album review crew with Tom and Zeus, and he brings up a Y&T. I don't know anything about Y&T. So then they play this stuff. I mean, like, stuff in there, like, it's cool, And he's seen him a bunch, So definitely would like to have him back on for sure. And then the next week, we spoke to Mike Wenban of Rare Vinyl, rarevinyl.com, who just happens to be our wonderful sponsor. And I got to tell you, I'm really proud to have them as our sponsor. Not that like having a Tampax wouldn't be a great sponsor or something like that. But for people who love rock music and love to collect rock records and stuff like that, Rare Vinyl has the most amazing collection of stuff, and you can find the coolest stuff on there. And I'll tell you, when I first moved to the Netherlands, and I sent them, the invoice, hey, please thank me for sponsorship. After a couple of months, we really only had like 2 uses of our code podcast, because if you use code podcast, you can save 10% off not only your first purchase, but all of your purchases kind of going forward, which is a pretty good deal. Well, after a couple of months, we'd only had 2 purchases, and it was like $117 or £117 for the stuff we purchased, and like 100 of it was me. So I'm like, this might not be working out. Well, I just talked to to the president, to the head, and he told me there have been over 110 purchases made with code podcast.
Wow. Well, whoever that is out there, thank you very much.
Yeah, and you're welcome too, by the way, because you just saved 10% off all this great stuff that you might have got. And if you've made purchases through rarevinyl.com, use that, hey, please send it to us. Let us know what you're picking up. Send it to us via email, uglyamericanwerewolf@gmail.com, or do it on Twitter and share it with the world. We'd love to see what you're getting and the condition of it and how pleased you are with your purchases. That's really cool. So thank you to Rare Vinyl for being amazing sponsors, and thanks to everybody who continues to use that code and get great discounts on music that you love.
It was great to talk to Mike, just somebody, again, who has a job that they're very passionate about, and to be able to go through and pick these records out. And we were talking to him a little bit about what are you looking for, what's like the holy grail, and he was talking about the Beatle records that had there was a different font or a different label on it, and that's if you can find that's great. But the other thing too was, I think he said he was looking through somebody's collection, and he had found like either letters to someone, or he had found like maybe some kind of adult fair that they were trying to hide, something like that. So it just proved to me that even though this was somebody's life, like you get to look through, somebody had this collection, like they bought these records and they love these records, and then for whatever reason they're giving them up. But it showed to me that even though we've talked about it and we know about it a million times before, music like that and collecting music is a very personal thing. And to be able to kind of look into somebody's life, it's interesting, and it shows you the relationship people have with this music.
Absolutely. Yeah, totally true there. And he had an interesting life, living in Japan for a while, and collecting all these kind of different things that he likes, and finding gems that, maybe you could buy for £1 or £5 that end up being worth hundreds of dollars. It's a fun hobby. I know a lot of people who listen to the show collect records, things like that. So definitely check out that episode number 89. And it did really well. I was kind of worried about it. Well, Mike Wenban isn't a famous person, right? We got Mike Wenban on, but we actually, I think it was the third best since we moved to Simplecast. But we're not going to get into Simplecast because we're moving away from Simplecast. Did awfully well, so I was happy about it. Again, Chris from Rock These Tweets or My Rock and Roll Heaven, he came back for number 91 to talk about the stadium tour. But number 99, our 99th show, was with Christian Swain, the founder and CEO of Pantheon Podcasts, of which we are a proud member. And that was a fun conversation. Usually, Jackson, you and I have it outlined pretty well what we want to talk about, and it's about a show or it's about a record or whatever. And we were just kind of riffing with him, like learning about him being an artist in LA back in the day. But really, we ended up just kind of talking about rock and roll from the 70s and stuff like that. And it was a really fun talk.
Yeah, definitely. And we've had more than one guest like this, but definitely a guy that we could talk to for just hours and hours and hours. The amount of knowledge that he has. And the cool part about him is that he's got a lot of knowledge, but it's not like, well, you don't know this, ha 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 ha. Like it's like he always wants to educate people. Like, we just got into talking about how when you listen to stuff from the 60s and the 70s, you can hear how far they advanced in recording. Right. And then I went back and listened to stuff from the 60s and said, oh yeah, like it really was leaps and bounds. But him just talking about it in a very matter of fact way, a guy who's been in the business a couple of different ways as an artist and now as an executive. Just a real wealth of knowledge and a real, very humble, very cool guy to talk to.
Yeah, his Rock and Roll Archeology podcast is a great one to listen to learn about all sorts of the history of rock and roll and things like that. And so we thank Christian not only for the opportunity to be part of Pantheon Podcasts with all the resources and experience and things that they bring to us, but for coming on our show. And if we can have him back on, I'm sure we will.
Absolutely.
And then show 103 with Martin Popoff. Again, this is somebody who I knew before I knew of. Didn't know personally, but knew of before we ever started the show, because he's written over 100 books on rock bands that we love. And he did Contents Under Pressure, the Rush book. And I'm just like, I know who Martin Popoff is. Turns out he's got, History in 5 Songs, a great podcast on the Pantheon network here. But I decided I wanted to do a Blue Oyster Cult show because I was supposed to go see them, of course. Did not work out. But then I figured, well, okay, I can't go see the show. Maybe we can get someone who knows Blue Oyster Cult onto the show. And sure enough, Martin did it. And it was kind of a fun walkthrough. It was not an album thing. It was, although we did a little concentration on a couple of albums, it was more of a primer for folks. Just if you didn't know much about Blue Oyster Cult or you were a general fan and want to learn more, it'd be a good show for it. He was very generous with his time and his knowledge.
Yeah, and I went back through and looked through the stuff that he's done on the book, and yeah, he's got some really great books, either both picture books and kind of the history of stuff that you maybe didn't even know I wanted to know about that. But yeah, read through it. And I think Blue Oyster Cult is one of those bands that it's kind of a conundrum. Like, they should have been a lot bigger. And then we talked about that a little bit, but definitely a cool deep cut to get into and a great guy to talk to.
Yeah, super guy. And you go to martinpopoff.com. And it may be a martinpopoff.ca too, if I'm not mistaken. But you can't get all his books because some of them are out of print now. Gifts for Friends, want to learn about certain bands, huge resource, Martin Popoff. Go check that out. And you get also that David Bowie book at 75. I think it's a real kind of a fancy book, a very nice book to add in the collection. But hopefully we're going to have him back on next year, because I know he's got like a Dark Side of the Moon at 50 book coming out, and I think he's got an AC/DC at 50 book coming out. We know we're going to talk about that.
Absolutely.
So, but those are the guests that we had on that, they may not be musicians, maybe they're podcasters, maybe they're writers, what have you. But like you said, we could have talked to a lot of those folks for a really long time. Some of them we had on a couple times, and I would love to have any of them on again, and hopefully next year we will.
Absolutely.
Hey guys, this is Ryan Condal, the executive producer, writer, creator of House of the Dragon, and you're listening to the Ugly American Werewolf in London podcast, and you should download and subscribe. Keep doing that.
All right, so let's shift gears here a little bit. When COVID hit, not only did we have to do this show to kind of keep from going mad and to keep in touch with another human being, but there were no live shows to go to in 2020 and part of 2021, so I had purchased thousands and thousands of dollars worth of tickets that got postponed, and some of them then postponed again a whole other year later. So some of those tickets I was holding on to for 2.5 years. So when 2022 came, it was like, okay, we can start going to concerts again. I was super psyched. And so many people around the world were too, right?
I think it was one of those things where, like, when COVID first hit, Zoom got to be really big in the business world, and people said, well, this will just take the place of in-person meetings. And that's not the case at all. People are dying to go out and see, interact with other human beings and see live shows. The first one I saw was the Cult that we talked about down in Orlando, and you could just feel the energy. It was just popping, that people were they couldn't wait to see live music again.
You're absolutely right. And because so many of these things had to be rescheduled, suddenly I was doing these things like back to back to back to back. So like this kind of stretched out. I was going to one a month, and then all of a sudden I was going to 4 in 1 month, right? So that's the way it worked out. So, look at episode 71, 73, 74, and 75 were all live reviews, that happened boom, 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 right in a row. 71 was Genesis in the O2.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw the second to last Genesis concert that they're ever going to do. And I took my wife, and it was a spectacle. I mean, it's what you would expect. All the amazing, the lighting and the stage prep and all that kind of stuff, and it featured the corpse of Phil Collins. I mean, I just felt so bad. He is not in good shape. He still had a little bit of that Phil wit, which is good. And he had people singing behind him to kind of help boost his sound. God bless him. He came through. Yeah. But it was kind of sad.
Yeah. I remember we were texting back and forth, and you said, I'm at the show, but Phil looks bad.
He looks bad,
and that's kind of you're on either side of the fence. Like, you got to see them, which was great, but it wasn't the most optimal way to see the artist. So you kind of go back and forth. Should he hang it up? Should he keep going? There is a whole generation of people that grew up with Genesis that would love to see Phil Collins play again, play these songs again.
I know.
But, at some point in time, he just can't do it anymore, like physically.
I know. And look, the whole band around him was fantastic. His son, Nick, that's not a nepotism gig. That guy's legit.
Yeah, correct.
He's really good, I wish Lily had come out just to say hello. Peter David was backstage to wish him their best,
I saw that,
which was cool for him to do. But it was kind of checking a box a little bit. Honestly, the music was great, but poor Phil was just not up to the task, and I'm glad it's over for him. But the next show 73 was Simple Minds live at Wembley Arena, not the stadium where they play soccer and football, but the arena right next door. And I tell you, that was a blast, man. That was a lot of fun.
And that's one of those bands where you said you're going to go see Simple Minds. I was like, Simple Minds? Okay. I mean, everybody remembers them who had anything connection with the 80s. Definitely a bigger band over there in the UK. But yeah, you going to see that show and then kind of talking about the music introduced me to a lot of songs that either I had heard a million years ago, kind of in passing, or stuff that was new to me. They're a great band. The shows that I've seen, like on YouTube and different places on the internet, it always looks, the band is fantastic. They have a great backup singers. It just looks like a lot of fun to go see.
That was great. And then a huge stage. I mean, it was a lot like Genesis, just maybe made it a little more pared down than that. But yeah, I mean, over here, or I'm not in England anymore, but in England in the 80s, called 1982, 1983, they were like, Simple Minds are U2. Like, they were that big. Whereas in America, U2 is the biggest band ever, and Simple Minds was the band who had that song from the Breakfast Club. But the thing is, when I start going to shows and stuff like that, I have to figure out some, because mostly I like to go to shows either with a buddy like you or on my own. I don't want to take my wife because she doesn't enjoy it that much. And if she's not having fun,
right,
then I'm having less fun. But I like to find shows that would be a good date night. Like, I'm not going to take her to see Iron Maiden. I'm not going to take her to see Jeff Beck. I'm not going to take her to see Yes, because she's not going to get it. But I'm like, Simple Minds, well, see, that's a good date night kind of thing. We'll go to that. Well, of course, I took her, but she'd been traveling so much and she'd been working so much, she got exhausted. So halfway through the show, she's like, I'm just going to go home. You would say, I'm just going to go home. She doesn't like to take the trains around like I did. So she went out and waited for an Uber, but it's tough to get an Uber down there. So she waited and finally got an Uber. So basically, I stayed for the whole show. I took the train home and I got home like 10 minutes after.
Oh, jeez.
So should have just stuck around for that, she-wolf, but suit yourself. But another date night one that I took her to, and show 74, was Sting. And it was Sting at the Palladium where I saw Steve Hackett. So it's not at an arena where there's like 15,000 people. This is like 2,200 people or something like that. And he did a week's worth of shows. So it was pretty cool, to see him in a more intimate place. Because the last time I had seen it, I'd seen him with his band at a racetrack, at an arena, and in a football stadium. And then I'd seen him at the Arena as a solo artist. But to see someone of his stature in a theater like that was pretty cool. And you got to go see the Cult the same week.
Yes.
House of Blues. And so we put those two together.
Yeah, that worked out well because we could do the 1-2 punch. Yeah, I was that was another interesting too. My wife was supposed to go with me. Our son was sick that day, so she decided that she didn't. Somebody had to stay with him.
Right.
So I ended up going by myself, which I wasn't super excited about. But it would have been maybe one of those things where she was going to make me happy. Not that she would have been super excited with the music, but to be there by myself in a, what do they call it, a general admission show,
right,
where I could work myself down to the stage and kind of just hunker down there, was a lot of fun. That was great. The energy was off the charts that night, and I was super excited to be there. They sounded great. They looked really excited to be there. I think they were. I mean, I understand that that's how they make money. Right. But I think I think they also do it for the joy of just performing. So you could tell everybody was just chomping at the bit to get this show underway.
Hell yeah, man. Hell yeah. Yeah. That's cool. I'm so glad that you got to go see the Cold after all these years again.
Yeah. And I mean, honestly, I'm waiting for them to announce new shows, because that was right before they put out Under the Midnight Sun. So I could see them coming back again to play songs off of that record.
And hopefully I can see them with you. Finally fulfilled the destiny we started about 29 years ago or whatever that was. All right, but then 75th show, Nick Mason's Saucer Full of Secrets at Royal Albert Hall. This was a very special show, and it became even more special for reasons we'll reveal here in just a little while. But it was my first ever show at Royal Albert Hall. A couple of years ago, I was supposed to go see, it was Yes, Jeff Beck, and Peter Frampton, all within about 9 or 10 days of each other in Royal Albert Hall. They postponed them. They postponed it again. Peter Frampton eventually canceled his show, and we'll get to Yes and Jeff Beck in a minute. But they all kind of postponed. But I lucked out. I got this killer seat, basically sat on the stage, on the side, right next to Gary Kemp. Was 8 steps from Gary Kemp the whole night, and just saw them performing it, sitting down, basically face to face, eye level with them. And it was incredible. It was so cool to hear these old Pink Floyd pre-Dark Side tunes and see how they did it, how they made all this magic with all their little toys and buttons and pedals and all that stuff, and that they really seemed to enjoy being together. Now, of course, we can fast forward a little bit if you want to show 100, which is when you and I got to go together to see them in Indianapolis. The first show we'd seen together in 28 years, which is nuts. The first show since Rolling Stones in Tampa Stadium in 1994. But it's because Pantheon Podcast sponsored their U.S. tour. And some of the bigger shows got to interview Nick. And then you and I obviously got to interview Gary and Guy, which was really special to us. But my first show ever at Royal Albert Hall, I basically sit on stage to see a member of Pink Floyd, not to mention Guy Pratt, who I consider a member of Pink Floyd, and doing these songs. It was a really special night.
Yeah, and you said that you did not realize your ticket was that good until you got there, correct?
I mean,
you bought a ticket, you think, oh, this would be pretty good, but then you actually sat down in the seat and said, I mean, you could touch the stage from where you were.
Oh, yeah, definitely. No, I could put my foot up on the stage. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. What happened was we were at Sting, and all of a sudden I decided I wanted to get Nick Mason's Saucer Full of Secrets. It was that day before we went to Sting. Like, I want to go see Nick Mason. So I just said to my wife, is it okay that I go to Nick Mason's Saucer Full of Secrets on, this day? I think it's Saturday. And she said, I don't know, we'll talk about it. And so I had a chance to get something about 15 or 16 seats further, like all the same row, but like further away from the stage.
Okay.
And then I'm like, okay, well, I'm not going to pull the trigger if she doesn't want me to go. So I didn't do it. Then at that show that night, she's like, I don't want to go see Nick Mason. I'm like, well, I wasn't asking you to go with me. I was asking if I can go. And she goes, oh, yeah, sure. So at Sting, I got that on my phone. I got that seat on the stage that just became available.
Wow.
And it was just a huge, huge special night, first ever show at Royal Albert Hall. But finally, I followed that up. Show 82, we talked about going to see Yes for the Close to the Edge 50 tour. Now, when I first bought tickets, it wasn't supposed to be Close to the Edge. It was supposed to be Relayer. They're going to do Relayer in its entirety. Yeah. But because it had been postponed, and like suddenly it's 50 years since Close to the Edge, which was a huge album for them, they decided, okay, we'll do Relayer in 2023, and we'll do Close to the Edge 50 now. And for me, that was really awesome, and Roger Dean was there to introduce him. And I sat right in front of John Wetton's wife, Lisa. I got to talk to her a little bit about John and stuff that she has going on. And I got to see all Roger Dean's artworks. And you can see, well, behind me up here, I bought some of them, and so that was a cool show to be able to, and they sounded great. And to see Jeff Downs and Steve Howe together as a huge Asia fan, that was a special night.
Yeah, and that's a record that really holds up, and we got to review that in connection with the show, and hopefully turn some people on to that. That was a record that I'd heard a couple things off of, but never in its entirety. So that was really good to get into that, and then to hear you not only see the show but get to talk to Lisa about John for a minute or two, because all roads lead back to Asia on this show.
That's for sure.
Then to see the Roger Dean artwork, which is a huge part of both Asia and Yes's kind of the makeup of their albums. Yeah, that was a special night.
Absolutely. No, it was a lot of fun. But then we kind of get into the big shows, the big Hyde Park shows. And, look, years ago, 2006, I think it was, or 2003 was the last time. No, I think it was 2006 was the last time I'd seen the Stones, and I decided, you know what, I'm not going to see the Stones because I've seen them now. I've seen them 6 times in 6 different places, different sets every time. It's expensive. I don't want to traipse all over America trying to track them down anymore.
Yeah,
maybe if they come to my town, I'll see them, but I'm not going overboard. I don't want to spend the money because I'd rather spend, the money on 5 different concerts versus one Stones concert, right? But when they're coming to play Hyde Park and I get general admission and I can take my daughter and I can take my wife, that's a different animal, that's a different beast, So I said, come on, girls, we're going to see the Stones. And we'll walk out before the end, so we're not leaving with 80,000 other people. And it was a beautiful night, a beautiful summer night, because, if I'd done that in America, it would have been 95 degrees. It was like 72 degrees. It was so nice. I put her on my shoulders for Honky Tonk Women. Keith played Connection, which we'd always dreamed about for 30 years, seeing him do. So it was such a super special night, so special that when they left to go to America that next day, and the Stones played Hyde Park the next weekend, I went back for part 2. And we talked about that on show 84.
Well, and that's what I was going to say too. You said you were never going to see the Stones again. I mean, it's one thing, if they're playing the, I don't know, Texas Motor Speedway or something, but to see them in Hyde Park, I mean, it doesn't get any more English than that.
I know. More than 50 years since they first played Hyde Park after the death of Brian Jones. And by the way, that first show I saw, they played London over 200 times since 1962, but it was the first show they played without Charlie in London.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that was a monumental thing. We did a show the previous year about Charlie's death and what he meant to us. So it was special. And what was cool about the next time was I didn't have to worry about driving the girls around, and I could find a nice little spot. And they switched up the show. I mean, as far as I think we're 6 different songs versus, the previous week. So that was worth it on its own. I think I've seen something like 79 different songs I've seen play on 8 different shows, even though some of them I've seen at every show. So, but also the second half of that show was not only Stones 2, but it was you at the stadium tour in Jacksonville with your son in the rain.
Yes. Yeah. That in the heat and then in the rain.
Right.
Yeah. And that was a great experience, to kind of get him into seeing live shows and kind of living it through him and seeing, what to expect. It was a great show. Yeah. We stuck it out through the rain and I think they had 2 separate rainouts that day.
Oh my God.
To see him experience that. We talked about, me not being super excited to see Poison,
right.
But the fact that I didn't even think they were going to be there because Bret Michaels was he had been in the ICU 24 hours before with COVID. To see him out there pumping the crowd up, just a great show and a great memory to have. And my favorite part of that was, well, not my favorite part, but one of the favorite parts was the opening act classless act,
Mhm.
they said, "Oh, hey, by the way, we're playing at midnight at this club, and you can get in with your ticket." And we walked out of that stadium at like 11:57. I said to my son, "Wait, hey, what do you think?" And he was like, "You are out of your mind. I'm like, come on, you should be the one saying, let's do this, not me. You should be dragging me out of here." But
Yeah.
great night and a great memory that the two of us have.
And we would have back in the day, it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then, then the third DST Summertime in Hyde Park was Duran Duran,
Mhm.
and I actually bought tickets for all three of us, but I think my wife was wiped out from running around America for a couple of weeks. So my daughter went with me, and we had a good time, just the two of us, just hanging out and seeing Duran Duran. I'd always wanted to see Duran Duran for the longest time.
Yeah.
Since we were little kids. And so to be able to see them, now look, I'd love to see them again, maybe in an arena or a theater or something like that, something a little more intimate with better sight lines and better sound. But it was a fun night, just me and my daughter, and hopefully we'll have some more of those to come here soon.
Yeah, absolutely. And Duran Duran's one of those bands where, we did a whole show on them. I think it was probably last year.
Yeah.
We were huge fans as younger kids, with MTV. And then, we got to college and it was like them. What are you talking about? But then you're like, no, I really like them.
Yeah,
they're a great band.
Great.
They've got great songs. And like you said, they're still bringing it in 2022.
Yeah. Good for them. I'm glad they still are.
And actually, it was funny because we were in the car and something, Save a Prayer or something comes on, and my son says, "Yeah, Duran Duran, are they still around? I'm like, they're playing Hyde Park over the summer, so yeah, they're still there, still doing it,
still doing it. Yeah, absolutely." And then show 90, Jeff Beck and Johnny Depp live. Yeah, I saw them at Royal Albert Hall. That was one we kind of put in the can for a little while. And then because we do that, sometimes we save shows to have one just in case something comes up and we can't put a show out one week for one reason or another. So we did that. We did the live review, but we also reviewed the album 18, which was not out at the time of the show. So it was kind of cool that, we kind of waited so we could kind of do both. Bottom line is Jeff Beck is a legend, and Johnny Depp as a musician is one hell of an actor. It's all I have to say.
And I think you saw that show right kind of at the beginning of that, like where he was more of a guest star, like you didn't really know that this album was coming out, so it was still kind of a novelty deal. Yeah, I'm glad that Depp gets to pursue his other passion, but yeah, it would be interesting to see Jeff Beck's take on that, like when nobody else was around. Like, Jeff, come over here, tell me, just between you and me, what's going on here? Like,
exactly. Exactly. I mean,
Jeff Beck,
John can sing and he can play the guitar, but doesn't mean he should be in a band with Jeff fucking Beck. Are you kidding me?
Correct. And Jeff Beck is another guy who should have been much bigger in the United States. Kind of an odd guy, never really stuck to one style,
right?
And very, very eclectic. So I think that kind of definitely hurt him commercially. But you go back and listen to those records, and he's just he is up there with the greats. Maybe one of the greatest that's ever picked up the Stratocaster.
Absolutely, inimitable too. I mean, like David Gilmour will say, I've tried to make sounds on the Stratocaster the way Jeff does it. I can't do it. And like, he knows his way around the Strat. He's not some rookie. Okay. If he can't do it, no one can do it.
There was an interview that Depp and Beck did. I think it was for Sirius or something. I don't know. And Johnny mentioned something about how, Jimi Hendrix said that, Jeff Beck was his inspiration or something. And, of course, Beck says, no, come on, Jimi Hendrix. But, you never know. I mean, I think he was that influential of a player. When you really go back and look at everything that he's done, deserves more credit than what he gets here.
That's for sure. And then, yes, our 100th show, you and me in Indianapolis together. Nick Mason, Saucer Full of Secrets, working the booth for Pantheon, meeting Heather, our contest winner who won front row seats, which how cool is that? To help someone's dream like that come true. A little bit of a planes, trains, and automobiles situation for me to get there. But fate would not prevent us from getting together for that show.
Correct.
And I'm just glad that we got to do it together.
And the thing was, you had seen them in Royal Albert. We got to interview Gary and Guy,
Mhm.
before the show. And so I was standing there. I remember at the booth, kind of talking to people, talking to the guy who worked the VIP for the band, and thinking to myself, oh man, I hope this. I'm hyping this up in my head. I hope this doesn't disappoint me. Did not disappoint at all. The show
Cool as hell.
blew me away.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I mean, I would have gone to see them the next night again had we had the opportunity. It was phenomenal.
Absolutely. Yeah. Hell yeah. So, and now I don't know if they're going to tour anymore. Is Nick done now? I mean, I know they wanted to do it since COVID, and now they've done their 2 tours. Is Nick going to go back to the farm and hang out with the grandkids? He never had to do it for money. He just, he wanted to go out there and do it, honor those songs, and get out and play a little bit. So who knows?
I mean, I hope he does. But if that's it, I'm glad we got to see it together, and do a show about that, and get to talk to the guys in the band.
All right, folks. Well, that's part 1 of 2022 in review on the Ugly American Werewolf in London. Wanted to break it up for you guys. We could have done 2.5 hours, but we figured we want to give everyone their due, and we're so proud to have all of our podcasters and journalist guests on the show, and we're so happy to be able to go to live shows again. We wanted to go over each one, give it its own little time and remembrance, because it was just great. It was after 2 years locked up, after 2 years of waiting for some shows to happen. I'm just so psyched to be able to see live music again, and for Jax and I to see live music together for the first time in almost 3 decades. So next week, we're going to go into the artists that we had on, and this was really something that made us proud, to be perfectly honest with you. When we started this show, we're amateurs at this. We don't know anything about podcasting. We don't know anything about social media. We don't know a whole lot about technology. And we don't have any reputation in the industry to say, hey, we want Rock and Roll Hall of Famers on our show. But slowly and surely, we worked the channels to get people on who we really wanted to talk to. And we're really proud of the interviews that we did in 2022. And hopefully there will be a lot more of those to come in 2023. So tune in next week. You get to hear about the artists we interviewed, like Deborah Bonham and Peter Bullock, like Jeff Downs and Carl Palmer of Asia, like Steve Hackett and Amanda Lehman of his band, like legendary Chris Slade, like Guy Pratt and Gary Kemp of Nick Mason's Saucer Full of Secrets. Gonna be a fun show, and Jax and I had a really fun time remembering these conversations, the questions we asked, and the laughs we had on the show. So as usual, folks, we want to know, did we get something right? Did we get something wrong? Did we miss the point? Did we leave out your favorite part? You have got to let us know. You email us, uglyamericanwerewolf@gmail.com. You can tweet us at ugly_werewolf or at actionjack72. We're on Instagram. We're on YouTube. Come find us. Come let us know the rock and roll bands, albums, movies, concerts, books, whatever. What do you want to hear us talk about? And thanks, as always, to our friends at Pantheon Pods. You can check out all the podcasts at pantheonpodcast.com or at Pantheon Pods. And of course, a very special thanks to our sponsor, rarevinyl.com, where if you use the code podcast, you can get 10% off not only your first order, but every order you make with them over time. Definitely check out rarevinyl.com to find the thing that your collection is missing. So I hope everyone had a good 2022, and I hope you have a great 2023. We've got big plans for the show, and we've got a lot of stuff happening in our lives. So everyone get a little rest, have a little fun, listen to some rock and roll music. And to all of you rock and rollers all around the world, be cool and stay safe.